Prosecuted a murder case. 21-year-old kid starts dating an older guy's ex-girlfriend. The older guy, real roughneck, loose connections with a local biker gang, was going all over his small town talking about how he was going to kick the kid's ass. The older guy sends some nudes of the ex while he's getting drunk at a bar, so the kid says something smart-ass in response. Older guy comes to the kid's house to fight him. The kid shoots him once, and the older guy dies. Jury didn't buy self-defense or castle doctrine. Convicted of voluntary manslaughter. 20 years. Burned up his appeals with no luck. I have a son about the kid's age. I could totally imagine him doing the exact same things if he were in a similar situation. Shit's going to haunt me until I die. No doubt about it. Started thinking about other work the moment the verdict came back. Had this happen to me twice. Got my client out on bail only to thereafter have him up and killed. First time, he was in building supposedly selling, got chased by the police and a struggle ensued where he was shot point blank in the head. Mother told me that it was my fault that he was killed and that I was working with the DA and the police. Second time, a young man no more than 16 gets released while waiting trial on robbery. One of the conditions of release was that he maintain a curfew. That very night he breaks curfew, goes over to somebody else's house and was killed in a drug-related robbery. Mother blamed me and said that the devil was working through me, that we were all demons. Criminal defense is a hard business. There was a case that I saw that involved a claim with fee shifting, meaning that if the plaintiff won, their attorney's fees would get paid by the defendant. Defendant pushed an aggressive legal position at trial that the judge agreed with, and won, avoiding a few thousand in liability to the plaintiff and a few thousand in attorney's fees. So far so good. But then the plaintiff appeals all the way to the state's high court, requiring a ton of briefing and time. High court agrees with plaintiff, reverses and sends back to the trial court, which now enters judgment against the defendant for a few thousand in damages against the plaintiff and tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees from the appeal. The defense lawyer probably regretted winning at first on that aggressive argument to the trial court. Family law is a little different in that you never really win per se. You may get more favorable rulings or better terms, but unless the opposing party did something illegal or mind-bogglingly stupid, it's never a decisive win really. Although I did have a case where my client fought really hard for the dog, and then ended up turning him over to a shelter. Fucking asshole. The ex-wife received an anonymous tip and was able to get him back quickly, so the fight wasn't even for the dog, it was just to take something she loved away from her. Jesus, divorce really can bring out the absolute worst in people. It really can, but there's the other side too. I've had couples who genuinely cared about the other person's well-being and wanted me to make sure they were provided for. I've had clients who let their partner keep the pets even though it killed them, but they knew how much they meant to the opposing party. There's good and bad in all of us. We choose which we want to be. Women wanted her daughter custody. We used the state preference about custody going to the mother, judge bias, her improved economical situation, and some minor garbage like her grades and discipline problems at school to discredit the dad. Not even a month after we won, the mother calls and says she had a problem. Then she explains the problem was that her BF raped the girl, and after that she had the gall to ask we pick up his defense. One of the things that made me quit to gov work. As a personal injury attorney, I've seen a few clients win the blue-collar lotto or getting more money than they reasonably know how to deal with. I do my best to educate them, but my job is to try and maximize their recovery, not teach them finance. I have definitely contributed to a few drug habits. As a personal injury attorney, do you still represent them if you think they are faking? That's a reasonable question. The answer is that I'm not a doctor. I refer people to doctors I trust. If I don't think a doctor is being honest, then I won't work with that person anymore. I do have one client that I have refused to represent again because I'm not sure he isn't causing accidents on purpose. I did some custody work early in my career and won some cases more on the merit of my trial skills than on the merit of the parents. The thing with family law work in general is that there is essentially no bar to entry. Anybody with a law degree and a pulse can get a family law practice up and running quickly because there is just an absolute glut of work. What that also means is that 75% plus of the lawyers practicing family law are clueless and awful. Early in my career I certainly was clueless, but at the least I was not awful. Therefore, in a battle between clueless plus awful versus just clueless, clueless usually won. So yeah, I can't recall any specific cases, except to say that fighting over children in court is a terrible thing and basically everyone loses. I regret that entire portion of my career. My ex-GF did family law right out of college, in, of all Places, one of the shittiest towns in the state, and the work was brutal emotionally. I'm guessing part of the glut of work would be the lack of people who would want to stay in the field, at least after some practice. I'd be more willing to defend a corporation from a lawsuit than to have to deal every day with parents lying, manipulating and slinging shit at each other while using their kids as a means to their end. Soul crushing. She didn't last long. She's a sweet girl, and moved to immigration where she's much happier. Did a divorce where the husband, who I was representing, wanted to trade custody of his children for a set of bedroom furniture. The bedroom furniture was not even like a family heirloom. It was furniture that you could probably get at a Rooms to Go or something. Ugh, still makes me ill. That's why I got out of family law. Edit, I'd honestly like to thank all of you for your various points of view on this particular pain point in my career. For the record, yes, I did win that particular point, but it did not fill me with any joy. But, those who said that it was probably for the best, perhaps you're right. The one where the client never paid. Edit, clarification/explanation. When I was a young associate, I was assigned to do a civil commercial trial for a client that was not happy with the senior partner. He stopped paying. We moved to withdraw. The court refused to allow us to withdraw and forced us to go to trial. Spend a significant amount of time in trial prep, etc. I win the trial. Client never pays. Client's position was that my boss screwed up the deal and that there never should have been a dispute/trial to begin with. Firm policy prohibits us from suing clients because that causes a drastic increase in malpractice premiums 9 times out of 10 if you sue a client for non-payment, they will countersue for malpractice. I work in medical malpractice defense. Once I had an obstetrician/gynecologist who burned a patient during a procedure. When I met with the doctor, he lied to me throughout the representation over 16 months saying he had no idea how it happened. There is a doctrine in law called res ipsa, meaning absent some sort of negligence. This accident could not have occurred. Woman came in without a burn, and after the procedure, the woman left with a burn. There's no way this doctor didn't know what had happened. The area of the burn was where he was operating on. It wasn't until I brought up settlement, because this was not a case we could win, did he say, "Oh, maybe I do know what happened." We ultimately settled that case, which is considered a favorable outcome considering the potential high monetary verdict. Sometimes I think this doctor really ought to have lost that case and their license. I got a spoiled brat of a teenager cleared of a shoplifting charge when he absolutely had done it. His rich parents hired me to represent him. I did that to the best of my ability, and we went to trial and won, but I can't say I felt good about it. This kid needed to be taught some accountability for his actions, and his parents just wanted to buy their way out of any trouble he got into. Right now in my criminology class we're doing reports on criminals, and I chose mine on Ethan Couch. Basically his defense said that he suffered from affluenza, a non-medical term where a person was raised so rich that they don't know the difference between right and wrong. So essentially Ethan drove under the influence at 16 years old with a BAC of .24 and hit and killed 4 people. The defense said that he suffered from affluenza or whatever, and the jury was like, well, sounds good to me. I laughed when I first heard the case because I didn't think it was real. I do family law, and I represented a father who had lost most of his custody from heroin use and imprisonment as a result. He came to me saying he was clean and doing good and had his life together, and it checked out. He had been clean for almost 9 months not counting jail time, and seemed sincere in wanting to resume a full relationship with his son. The other side fought viciously to keep him at extremely little custody and supervised at that, but we prevailed and got an order restoring fairly frequent unsupervised partial custody. Not long afterwards, only about 3 months after the case, he was back doing heroin, sold most of his furniture, and for me the most soul-crushing is that he set up a fake GoFundMe stuff for his child's cancer. His child didn't have cancer and has never had cancer, so you know where that money was going. I withdrew my appearance at this point, so I don't know what happened afterwards, but I imagine and hope his custody was taken away. Basically the net result of winning that case was that the poor boy had to witness his father relapse on heroin and was exploited for money. Worst case I ever won. This probably won't be the best answer, but it is a real one. After law school I had to turn down a criminal defense job offer because my wife got a better offer somewhere else. So basically, I followed her along and was desperate to find something. After 3 months of fruitless efforts, I would take just about any job that required a JD, whereas literally the only thing I ever wanted to do was criminal defense. 3 months after moving I got an interview for a real estate litigation job. They hired me the next day. Looking back, that was probably red flag number 1. First day on the job they taught me how to foreclose on a claim of lien. These are 2 things I had never heard of before. Turns out, It is totally brainless work if you have the right forms, mind-numbingly boring, basically just cutting and pasting new addresses and amounts owed. So anyways, it took me about 2 months to realize this, when I had my first set of hearings, but literally my sole purpose at the firm, which represented over 100 homeowners associations, was to take people's houses away for not paying their homeowners association dues. After my first set of foreclosures, I actually slipped into a pretty legitimate depression. I was getting paid peanuts to drive nearly an hour to work every day to do work I despised on behalf of people I literally could not pretend to care about. The straw on the camel's back was when I started signing the foreclosures and realized I was that guy. You know? I understand someone has to do the work, I guess. There certainly is a lot of money to be made, but it was not for me. I did that job for 3 months, came home one Friday, and told my wife I'd rather be homeless than go back on Monday. By some stroke of luck, I started a stellar criminal defense job within 2 weeks, and all of the heartache has 100% been worth it. I've won a lot of cases. You have to redefine winning and losing when doing criminal defense, because sometimes even a particularly juicy plea is a win emo, and never once felt bad about it. For example, I got a guy's plea deal cut from 60 years to 15 years for a string of robberies where the interrogations and confessions were overwhelmingly unconstitutional, like, the interrogations were textbook How Not to Do an Interrogation, Missouri v. Siebert, and stuff like that. Never lost sleep over someone not going to jail. So yeah, every case where I took someone's house away, probably 24 times, for not paying HOA fees, generally $4,000 or less, was the worst case I ever won. Fuck HOAs. I have handled my fair share of domestic abuse cases, about 90% of which end with dismissals. I never like winning them, but almost always do. Why do you think that is? Why do they end in dismissals? Because victims typically reconcile with their abusers and stop coming to court. State can't prove the case, or it's very hard to prove a case, without the testimony of a victim. Happens almost every time. Settled a personal injury case for a guy and he was set to get about $5,000. He was in jail. I held the money for a couple months, and when he got out he came by to get the money without delay. The next day the cops came around and asked if I knew him. I explained that I did. I was told he died that night of an overdose, and the only thing found on him was my card, some drugs he had not yet used, and a needle. We settled a case for several $1,000,000 for a girl whose father was killed. The mother, who was divorced from the father, tried every way possible to get the money, but it was placed into a blocked account until the girl turned 18. The day she turned 18, Mom told her they were going to transfer the money to a better account. Mom transferred it to her own account and fled the country without the daughter. Screwed her own kid over for money, and essentially made her kid an orphan. Money does horrible things to people. True that. My stepmother's will mysteriously changed on her hospice deathbed, giving custody and funds of my half-sister to her alcoholic sister. We fought hard and eventually got the money locked into an account for my sister under control of my uncle, who had original custody, until she turned 18. But the lazy-ass court said she had grown accustomed to living with the step-aunt for 3 months and thus granted custody to her. And that's how I have a sister I seldom see who lives on the other side of the country and received extremely subpar education growing up. Was almost going to get to see her this Christmas, but she couldn't swing the time off from her crap job to get a ticket here. I'm a work comp attorney. Now represent injured people, but used to work on other side insurance defense. There was an applicant with a serious injury. Fell off a ladder, busted back with fusion, shoulder fucked, years of treatment. Internal issues, psych issues, really just fucked up. 50% plus permanent disability. We were 5 years in and finally getting to settlement time. If we bought out his future medical, settlement pretty far into 6 figures. This guy was the sole provider for wife and 2 kids. Then we found out he had aggressive brain cancer. Expected only couple years to live, at best. Thus, we wouldn't buy out future medical anymore. Still got permanent disability for $60K-ish. But can't give medical buyout based on 25 plus year life expectancy anymore. I felt terrible for the guy and his family. Me and the adjuster tried to get insurance to agree to some sort of amount like 5-year buyout, but the bean counters said hell no. The attorney knew it wasn't me making the decision. Even though he worked on that guy's file for 5+ years, he decided to take $0 in fees. I have so much respect for that attorney turning down $10K plus in fees to help his client in a very shitty situation. I do juvenile work, criminal law and family law. I represented this client first when he was a juvenile charged with disorderly conduct at school and fighting, Then when he became an adult it was for simple things like possession of marijuana. As he got older, it became easier and easier to figure out what part of his life hasn't gone as well as it could, and I tried to counsel him and push him to better himself. He got his GED, he started going to he started classes at a community college, and found a part-time job. On the night of his 21st birthday, he was charged with a DWI. Of course I'll take care of that too. About 6 months later, we are due in court for trial, on a Monday, and he doesn't show up, which at this point in his life is highly unusual. As I'm trying to figure out where he is, the court starts going over arraignment/first appearances, and then lo and behold 3 people are up for murder charges. The prosecution starts to tell the judge what the facts/circumstances of the case are and mentions a few victims' names. Apparently, my client was at a party when these 3 individuals decided to allegedly do a drive-by shooting. My client suffered multiple gunshot wounds and didn't make it to the hospital. So, by default, as you can't prosecute a dead person, the state has to take a dismissal. I guess technically a win. Was representing the government at a social benefits tribunal. The applicant was an autistic man who was struggling to make ends meet but was trying his absolute best to contribute everything he could to society. He had a job where his manager was very accommodating and he was a very sympathetic person. He just wanted the extra cash to make his life a little easier for himself. Sadly, he didn't qualify for the benefit, but I think he deserved it. My closing argument was that no matter how much we empathized with this man, no matter how deserving we thought he was, he simply didn't qualify and the tribunal had to apply the law. He was unsuccessful, and when I left the building to head back to my office he was just sitting outside on the curb crying. That image has stuck with me for a few years. Pretty heartbreaking. Edit, for those of you that are sending me words of support, thank you. That was the lowest point in my career and I have moved on. It's really important to remember that mental health in the legal profession is a very real issue that is killing people. There aren't sufficient supports in place to help people like me and many others who find themselves in positions like this. For those telling me I'm a horrible person, you literally can't say anything that will make me feel worse about this, so please have some compassion. I work elsewhere and provide a much needed service to my country and my community. I also donate to a mental health charity on a monthly basis. What are you doing to fight unfair systems? Also, in case you aren't aware, social benefits are a finite resource. Often, the criteria for qualification are strict. Not everyone can receive it, otherwise there wouldn't be enough to go around. The particular system I was working in was a needs-based system. Those with the most severe disabilities met the criteria and I often advocated on their behalf despite the government's initial position if I felt they met the criteria.